Hi friends, it's Aisha. I hope you guys are having a great end of the year and or beginning of the year, depending on when this video is uploaded. Thank you for clicking on this video. Today, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 books of 2020. These are books that just really left an impact on me, that I had a great time reading, and just want to share with all of you. So, I only have 4 physical books to hold up in front of you all, because for the majority of 2020, I was borrowing ebooks from my library, on Overdrive specifically. So I only have 4 books to physically show you today, but I will try to put a picture of the other books that I read. Oh, and before we start, this list, I separated it into a bottom 5 category and a top 5 category, just because it's so hard for me to pick which book is number 1 or like number 10. So I just thought dividing it would make things easier for myself. So let's get right into the video. So the first book in the bottom 5 is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I really hope I said her name correctly. This book is about, so there's a world where magic used to exist, but for whatever reason, it doesn't anymore. And so there's this group of people who used to be able to perform magic, but then one day magic just completely disappeared from the world. And so this is a multi-POV story, and one of the characters finds a book that brings magic back to this group of people. And so it's definitely a journey kind of story. You go on this adventure with these group of characters, and I loved it so much. Thinking about it, I didn't really like 2 of the 3 perspectives of the book, but I think they were still like written very well. But yes, definitely I love this book. I did read the second book, Children of Virtue and Vengeance. I read that this year as well. Unfortunately, it didn't make this list. I do still enjoy the book, and I will be continuing with the series. It's just I didn't think that second book was as strong as the first one. But still, really love this book. So the second book I have to talk about is The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Specifically, the Audible audiobook. They have, I believe they combined the first 3 books into one audiobook that you listen to, and I loved it. It has a full cast of characters, and it feels like a TV show that you're listening to. That's really what it feels like. So you open with this person who tries to summon death, but they kind of get things messed up somewhere in their ritual, so they actually summon the Lord of Dreams, Sandman. And so once the Sandman arrives, a bunch of weird things start happening, like people all over the world just fall asleep, or they have sleeping problems. Like I know one person like doesn't sleep anymore, and another person like falls into this deep sleep. So the first story kind of follows the Sandman. He's in prison for like, I think around 100 years before he finally gets out, and it's just like the adventures that he has after that, how imprisonment changed him. And then we also follow the stories of kind of the people who were affected by the sleeping spell, or I'm not sure if it's a spell that put them to sleep, but also like their descendants of that as well. It's just a very fun story, and I absolutely loved it. The acting, like everybody brought their A game to this audiobook, and I loved it so much. Oh, and it was a lot more adult than I had thought. This book really surprised me, because I thought it was like a middle grade story for some reason. But no, there's a lot of like death in this book. There's a lot of like graphic things that happen, or that almost happens. And I have to look this up because I really don't know what the demographic for this book is, but I just thought it would be a lot more, I don't know, Harry Potter-esque, very middle grade, which isn't to say that I thought it was going to be a bad book. I picked it up because I thought I would enjoy it. The next book on my list is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. And this book, I don't typically pick up YA contemporaries. And so I read the book, cried my eyes out, and then watched the movie and then cried again. It was such a good book and a good movie. So the book, I should probably tell you what the book is about. So it's about these two people. So it is dual perspective. Seeing a theme here. So about these two people. So one is an immigrant from Jamaica, and she's actually getting deported in 24 hours, I believe. And then another one is this Korean American boy who is kind of deciding what he wants to do with his life. I believe he has an interview to some prestigious college, but really what he wants to do is poetry. He wants to write poetry. So they kind of meet, and the girl is very like pragmatic. You know, she doesn't really believe in love, and the boy is like, "Oh, I'm gonna make you fall in love with me in 24 hours," and then shenanigans ensue. It's such a fun, happy read, and I loved it so much. I want to reread it. I want to reread everything on this list, to be honest. So the next book on my list in the bottom 5 is Beach Read by Emily Henry. And this book is also, it's surprising that it made this list. I wasn't expecting to love this book as much as I did. Yeah, it's insane. I don't normally love contemporaries or romance, but I'm excited about all these new genres that I'm just diving into and loving. So this book is, again, dual perspective. So it follows, wait, no. It is not dual perspective. Never mind. No. I read it I think I read it this month actually, or maybe I read it last month. Time. What is time anymore? You follow this girl named January, and she inherits this beach house from her father, who unfortunately passed away. And she finds out that her beach house is actually right next door to her college rival. And it's just hilarious because her college rival doesn't know that he's her rival. So it's such a cute little entanglement that happens. She's dealing with her grief, but then also she's dealing with a lot of anger towards her father as well. And not even just her father as well. Her mother has been very distant to her. So there's a lot more. I liked that there's a lot more to the plot than just the romance. I'm realizing that I didn't really describe the plot of the story. So the plot of the story is that these two people, these two rivals, if you will, they kind of decide to switch genres. So January is a romance author. So she writes like chick lit. And then where her rival, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name, Augustus writes literary fiction, but like kind of dark literary fiction. So he writes kind of dark literary fiction. So they decide to swap genres because they're both in like a really bad writing rut. So January will write the dark literary fiction, and Augustus will try to write a romance. And then so every weekend they get together and do research, which is basically just them going on dates. So Augustus will show January what he does for research for his books, and she will do the same to him. So it's a very, very funny book. It's very funny, very realistic. I like that it wasn't very insta-lovey. I like that we built up to it. I think it was built up to very nicely, and the characters were well thought out. There were some issues that I had with the book, but I can't exactly say what they were without giving spoilers. The next and last book in the bottom 5 category is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And let me just say, I read 3 books from Naomi Novik this year, and I loved all of them. All of them were 5-star reads, so she's officially one of my favorite authors now. I'll read anything she writes because I just love her writing so much. So Uprooted is a fantasy story. It's, I believe, Russian inspired. And it follows this, so the book follows this character named Agni, and ever since she was little, she would always like just get really dirty. She would go into the woods or like just walk around the town, and it's like dirt would just be attracted to her. So in this town, there is this person called the Dragon, and he is a magician that kind of watches over the town. And once every, I want to say 5 years, but I think it's later than that. Once every 5 years, he'll take a girl from the town and bring him like into his like castle, which is kind of apart from the town itself. And nobody knows what happens to the girls, but when they leave the castle, when like the 5 years is over, they can do whatever they want, and they all kind of choose to leave the town to go like, because it's a small town, so they go into like bigger cities just to, you know, live their life for whatever reason. So it's always like this big mystery that the dragon's kind of doing something bad to them. And so on the day that he's supposed to choose a new person to take with him to his castle, Agni gets chosen, and things ensue from there. You know, she realizes that and not all is what it seems with the dragon and his motives for taking the women, that he might not be a bad character after all. At the same time, there's this like foreboding presence of the woods. And this woods, there's like a bunch of nefarious creatures living in there that will take people, kill them. And so the magician dragon, it's actually his job to protect the town from the forces in the woods. I believe that's what his job is. And so Agni kind of gets wrapped up with helping the dragon protect the town. Most of the fantasies I read have a lot of romance in them, but this one, so there's romance, but it's not like the focal point of the story. I think the focal point of the story is more about love, but not romantic love. Love for like your home, love for your family, love for your friends. And I love that Agni kind of puts that above her whatever feelings that she might have for the dragon. And I love this story so much. I definitely recommend Naomi Novik. Okay, so going into the top 5 books of the year, but we're going to stick with Naomi Novik. So the next book is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. And this book is a multi-perspective story, and it follows multiple people, but the main person that kind of puts a ripple in the plot is Miriam. I believe her name is Miriam. I'm not the best at remembering character names, but I believe it's Miriam. So Miriam and her family are Jewish, and they're also moneylenders. So her father is the moneylender, and then her grandfather on her mother's side is a moneylender as well. And her father is very nice, like too nice, to the point where their family is starving. He won't ask for his money back from people. So the family is starving, and then the mother gets sick. And so Miriam decides to take it on herself to go and get their money back. And she's actually very good at it. She has a very strong backbone, but she does make a mistake one day when she's bragging about turning silver into gold. And what she means by that, of course, is like she lent out silver to someone and getting back gold because of interest and trading and things like that, right? But this fae creature overhears her and wants her to make good on her claim of being able to turn silver into gold. So he gives her silver, their fae silver, and has her turn that into gold. We also follow other people in the story as well. We follow a helper that Miriam has whose brothers kind of help out Miriam's family with like the yard work and things like that. And they kind of get wrapped up in the story as well. And then we follow someone who gets engaged to a king to find out that the king has some magic of his own and isn't exactly all that he seems. But I loved how the characters were written. Some of them were really funny. And yeah, I really loved the book. It was great. So the last Naomi Novik book that we'll be talking about is A Deadly Education. I loved this book so much. It's pretty short. It's about, let's see, why can't I get this open? So it's 320 pages. I wish it was longer. That's how much I love this book. I want more pages. I want more of this book. The main character is so like snappy. Okay, let me actually tell you what the book is about instead of just gushing over the character. So it's centered in a magical school. So the school is completely autonomous. This is one big machine that kind of runs on its own. And it's supposed to be a safe haven for the kids. In this world, magic users generate mana, and there are these creatures, monsters, who feed on mana. And then when kids hit around like 12, 13, they get kind of a spike in their mana. So they get a lot more creatures coming after them. So the adults built this school as kind of a safe haven from them to keep them safe from the monsters, only that didn't work. So there's a lot of monsters that kind of infiltrate this school, and usually the seniors are the ones that kind of deal with the bulk of them, the really dangerous ones, at their graduation. And so this story centers around, what is her name? What is her name? So this story centers around Galadriel, and Galadriel is actually like destined to be this evil sorceress. Like everything about her has this like evil vibe, you know? Even the school itself, she'll ask the school for a spell to like clean her room, and then the school will give her a spell to like demolish her entire room and probably the rooms next to her as well. So there's Galadriel, and Galadriel gets kind of tied up with this person called Orion, and Orion has an affinity for killing monsters, and that's like all he does. So Galadriel kind of gets pulled into his monster fighting business, and they kind of realize they're not that different. And then there's a very cute fake dating trope in here, only one of them doesn't know that they're dating, so it's very funny. I completely recommend this book. I had a blast. Like, it was such a fun book, like just fun. Okay, so the next book on this list is Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. I'm actually very surprised that it made it to this list for me because it's very heavy on the science fiction. It's a fantasy book, but it's also science fiction, and it's quite heavy on that. And it's also a very plot-driven story, and I usually love character-driven stories. So it's strange that I just love this book as much as I did. So the magic system in this book is very unique. You can change the reality of an item. You can make an item change its mind about what it does, if that makes sense. Like if something weighs like 2 pounds, you can convince it that it actually weighs like 1,000 pounds, and then it starts like sinking into the ground. It just like catapults downwards because it now believes that it weighs like that many pounds. So we follow this main character, Sansia, and she is a thief who can interact with these items that are scribed into changing their reality. The story opens with Sansia stealing like this really important artifact for someone. Her stealing this artifact kind of throws her into the middle of all these different powerful groups who are trying to gain control of their city. And it's also a dual perspective story as well. It also follows, it largely follows like the chief officer of the town, that he's kind of taken it upon himself to make the city a safer place to live. And so, of course, this person who gets on the most wanted list, he kind of makes it his mission to capture this person, and then they kind of collide, and he also gets thrown into the scheme as well. And it's a really interesting story. I was like hooked on this book. This was just such an amazing story. I felt like I just dived into this world and I did not want to leave. So I really loved this first book. I will say that I also read the second book, Shorefall, this year, and it wasn't as good. It was kind of a letdown. For some reason, the plot-driven story just didn't work for me in this book when it worked perfectly fine in the first one. Maybe it's more of me as a reader. I was just in the mood for something that's more character-driven, and so I picked it up at the wrong time. That's always a reason that I might not have loved it as much. But I believe this is going to be a trilogy, and I don't know when the third book comes out, but I'm definitely thinking about doing a reread of the first 2 books when closer to third book comes out, because I do still really like this series and I do want to continue with it. So the next book on my best books of 2020 list is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I can't even describe this book. It is so... This book is like a dream. That's what it feels like. It feels like you're reading someone's like fever dream. That's how I felt when I was reading this book. I didn't understand a single thing that was happening, and I still loved it. So this book is about a boy he's in grad school, I believe, and he goes to the library on research for something, and he finds this book that has his history in it. It tells the story of him as a boy who found a door that was kind of drawn on, but it looked very like extremely real, and he didn't open the door. So the story goes on to this boy trying to find more information about the author or just the book itself, because it has of course his life and his story in it, which is a strange thing to find in a book. So in his search to try to find more information about the book or the author, he stumbles across this magical library that has an endless amount of books, as well as this place called the Starless Sea. And he learns that there's a prophecy about him and this person that he's met along the way. And then he meets fate and time, who are apparently real people. And it's just, the writing is so good. It's so good. And it's just, a lot happens in this book, but like nothing happens in this book. It's a slow paced, it's kind of a slow paced book. But I didn't mind because the writing is just, when I say it's like a dream, it really is. This is a book that I'm definitely going to be rereading in 2021 because I originally borrowed this book from the library. So I'm excited to read and annotate and just mark up this book. It's such a good read. I love it. So the last and final book on this list, I'm cheating on because it's not a book, it's a series. The series is An Ember in the Ashes, and I'm holding up the last book, which is A Sky Beyond the Storm, and the series is by Sabat Tahir, and I love this so much. I picked this up, and I want to say that I picked the first book up in October, and I don't have that one to show because I have it on my Kindle. So I'm showing the last book. And honestly, if I have to choose between my favorite books in the series, it's a quartet. So if I had to choose, it would be either the first book or the last book. That's my favorite. But I can't choose. It's too hard. So I'm picking the entire series, okay? The entire series is amazing. It's a multi-perspective story. So the first perspective that we follow is Leia. Can I stop making noise? Leia is a part of this group of people who have been suppressed for the last 1,000 years. And so the story starts with her brother being taken to prison and her grandparents killed. Well, she was able to get away, but she feels extremely guilty about it. So she enlists help from the rebellion movement to help break her brother out of jail. And one of their conditions for helping her is that she becomes their spy, but she has to go into slavery at this school. The second perspective that we follow is Elias. And Elias is a student at this school. And so the school itself, it trains people to be what they call a mask, which is basically just this cold-blooded soldier and killer. And so Elias is a student at this school. So when the book starts, he is about to graduate and he has a plan to run away right after graduation because he doesn't approve of the morals and the actions that a mask has to do. So he makes that plan to run away. So that's where we meet him in the beginning of the story. And the third perspective is Helen. Helen is also a student at this school. She's actually Elias's best friend. They grew up together. But she is I wouldn't say that Helen approves of the life of a mask, but she is just more loyal to it, to the empire. She's loyal to the empire and to her people. So she's kind of in the same boat as Elias when the book starts. They're about to graduate and become full-fledged masks. And so that's kind of where the story opens, and it just gets wilder from there. There is magic in this book. There's jinns and ifrits and a lot of different magical creatures, and it's just such an amazing series. I loved it so much. I will say that for the better part of the series, I did not like one of the characters, but I could understand her. She was very well written, and I did end up caring for her by the last book. I ended up caring for her and really feeling for her. This is definitely like a mature YA. There's like torture and killing and slavery and just so many bad things happen in this book, in this series in general. If you're going to pick up this book, be prepared to have your heart ripped out. It will be ripped out. It's so good. When I finished this book, I was like weeping for a solid like 20 minutes after I finished this book because it was so good. It was so good. All right, and that is the end of my best books of 2020. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will be posting my worst books of 2020 very shortly, so make sure you stick around for that. I'd really appreciate it if you could like the video if you enjoyed the content, and subscribe to the channel. And then in the description box below, please tell me if you have read any of these books, if you love them, or maybe you hated them. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.